if Mike shows up. Michelle took his thing.
He can have mine if he shows up. It's all right.
Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. Yes, I did. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Are we being taped or not, right? We are? Okay. Is it live, Beth? This meeting is to go over the MCAS results that were finally released this morning, and also to start a discussion on the district improvement plan.
At the last school committee meeting, you had some concerns that the district improvement plan had, been put in front of you without the backup data, at least from the MCAS and the state accountability data. That has now been released. It's public, so that we can actually put it in front of you, along with the district improvement plan. And I'm going to go back and reiterate that the district does get this data, even if it's in raw form. You don't have the nice tables, you don't have the accountability data till we had it, barely last week. And we do get a chance to look at it, and we use it during our administrative retreat in the summer to begin to look at areas of weakness, areas of strength, and then plan what do we do about those. What things do we continue to support? What things do we need to fix? What areas do we need to improve in? So we did that. All the administrators met with me for 3 days. We've also looked at that data at the building level during the first few days of school, because it was part of the educator self-assessment and goal-setting exercises that they needed to do. And from all that feedback, the district improvement plan was put together. I'm going to let Ann begin with the accountability data, which includes a little bit of the MCAS and a little bit of what the state is now tending towards, which is more growth-oriented and kind of trying to improve certain groups of students who in the past have not done well. So I'm going to turn it over to Ann.
Thank you.
And we can go.
This is really MCAS 101. There's a new accountability system in place. Many of us are probably just now familiar with AYP, or Adequate Yearly Progress, where we received a district and a school rating on how we were doing to attain proficiency for all students by the year 2014. And when the state actually applied for the waiver under No Child Left Behind, and it was granted, they decided that they were going to change the formula and now reconfigure the accountability so that each school district was actually going to be measured against themselves as opposed to against other schools and districts in the Commonwealth. So I'm going to walk you through this just a little bit, just so that you have an understanding of the hows and the whys. So again, the state decided that they were going to look at reconfiguring the formula of reducing the number of youngsters who are struggling students and increase as many possible students towards proficiency. Whereas we had a goal to get 100% of our students by 2014 to proficiency, they now are looking at the formula, where are we today, and let's cut that gap in half. So again, AYP has now gone away, and it's now been replaced with what's called PPI. And PPI is the Progress and the Performance Index. And again, we will be looking at our own personal growth over the last 4 years with a formula which I'll explain in just a minute, and then we will be ranked or rated in perspective to other schools with the same grade configurations. So for instance, our grade 5 is at the middle school, so our middle school grade 5 students will be compared with other middle schools as opposed to being rated against an elementary school. So again, a little bit more background in that the Department of Ed sought this flexibility because they felt that by decreasing the fast track and making the gap cut in half was much more realistic and much more attainable. So they said that we're going to look at proficiency versus just the achievement gap. They feel it's ambitious, but it's also achievable. It's going to provide greater progress for students who are the furthest behind. In a little bit, we're going to talk about how we can score extra credit points for moving youngsters from one rating, one category to another. We're going to focus now on English language arts, math, and science. So for the first time, science is now factored in to our PPI, whereas before we reported out on science, but it wasn't part of the formula for AYP. The goal is going to be the same for all in the Commonwealth, but the target is now going to be different. So instead of a universal target, each school and district will have their own specific target, and it's going to apply statewide, district, school, as well as within our local groups. So on this chart, you can see before we were targeted towards 2014 having all kids at proficient, with our critical performance index being 100%. The two lines on this chart actually show the solid line was the ELA, and the math, the dotted dashed line, was in the area of mathematics. And you could see, depending on where we were rated, it was a long way to get to 100%. Under the new regulation, this is just an example, this is not Westport specific, and this was a slide right from the Department of Ed. We can look at, we're going to get a rating for kids in the area of mathematics, we're going to get all students, the aggregate, but then it may be broken down by subset. So in this particular case, this is a low income, and the goal is to get every youngster at 100, but currently in this particular example, they're only at 67.4. So the state says, in order to come up with the formula, we take the difference. So the difference is 32.6 to get to the 100. And the expectation would be then, let's cut that in half, and by now extend it to the year 2017, this school district has to attain a score of 83.7. So they feel it's much more realistic, it's much more attainable. So it's cutting the achievement gap in half by the year 2017. And every year, they're going to look at the success rate we had with our proficiency students, and then they're going to compare it back the last 3 years. So it'll be an aggregate of a total of 4 years. Tony?
And so the 83.7 in this example is in 2017?
No, this is, yes, you would strive for 83.7 in the year 2017, because this subgroup right now is only at 67.4.
But are there markers?
Yes,
in
I'm going to show,
okay.
yes, every year you can see that it's going to, each year we are going to have a target that we're going to have to attain. And if you don't meet the target, then a label will come along with it.
And less points.
And less points, exactly. So, again, AYP has gone away. The new language now is PPI, Progress and Performance Index. So it's going to be a measure of the district. Each school will have a PPI, and each subgroup will have their progress measured. Again, it's looking at the last 4 years of, in this case, our MCAS, our annual progress, with the most weight being on the current year. So in 2012, 40% of this formula went towards how well our kids scored this current year. 30% were for the kids in 2011, all the way back to 2009, which is why some of the charts that we'll share with you tonight will actually show a comparison to how we've done over the last 4 years. And again, we're going to get a state, a district, a school, and then subgroup levels. The state is still maintaining their 5-level system, with 1 being the absolute best place you can be, and with 5 being the schools that will be taken over by the state. And last year, we were a level 2 district, because you're actually only as strong as your weakest performing school. And Westport has still maintained the level 2 status this year. So what does the PPI measure then? Well, it looks at elementary schools, it's the participation, so just how many of our students actually took MCAS. It measures the progress on the critical performance index, that's gap closure, in ELA, math, and now in science will be reported and factored into this formula. It's always been reported, but it was never part of the AYP formula. It's going to show us specific growth in ELA and in math. Now, you have to have 2 consecutive years of data in order to show growth. And the reason they don't have the growth in the science is right now we only administer the science at grade 5, grade 8, and then once in high school. So there's no growth measure in the science. And it's going to look at improving performance at the advanced and the warning failing levels. Meaning, while we strive to get kids to proficient, we're going to be rewarded now for moving kids from, it's failing at the high school level, and the same category is called warning at the elementary and at the middle school level, because you have multiple opportunities then to take it. So it's the same category, but depending on what level, whether it's warning or whether it's failure. So we strive to get all kids to proficient, but now we're just not going to settle for proficiency. We want to get many more kids into the advanced category. We want them to get up to the 280. So the state is going to reward us with extra credit points for more kids now that we're moving towards the right, if you will. And at high school, they're also in that formula going to factor in graduation as well as the annual dropout rate. So some key concepts then. As I said, it's a measure of progress towards our own gap narrowing progress. Okay, what are our goals here in Westport, and how can we make sure we at least meet our target or exceed that to get all kids to narrow that proficiency gap. It will annually measure our progress, and again, it'll be representing a trend over 4 years' worth of growth. The scale will run from 0 to 100. Their target is being set right now, the state at 75. A score or a PPI of 50 means there's been improvement, but it's below the target. If our score were close to the 25 range, that would be no change, and a 0 is a decline. The PPI determinations for all groups will give us some valuable information in telling us how we can offer some additional help and supports. A lot of the Title I and the Title II funding now specifically are geared towards improving and closing that achievement gap. And again, about 80% of the schools and the districts in the Commonwealth attain a Level 1 or a Level 2 status. So the bottom 20% are rated a Level 3 or 4, and as of right now in the Commonwealth, there are no Level 5 districts. So again, just a little bit more on how it's calculated. There are points that are awarded for each of the PPI indicators. You'll get full credit for meeting the goal. We'll get extra credit if we exceed the targets, and we'll get partial credit for making progress. So the titles now are: we can either exceed the target, we can meet the target, we can show we've improved but below the target, there may be no change, or there may be a decline. In the past, we could have, I'm on the next slide now, page 11. In the past, we could have youngsters counted in multiple subgroups, and the state realized that it was the same kids that were being counted over and over, and in some ways the data was skewed and misleading. So this time around, they're going to call a high needs group, and they're still going to break down each of the youngsters, whether they fall into low income, whether they fall into special ed, whether they fall into the English language learner, or any of the 7 racial or ethnic categories. They're still going to provide that information for us We do have to have a minimum of 30 students in that subgroup in order to get a score. However, they're now going to give us a category called high needs, and they're only going to count the youngster once. So the high needs category will give us actually some more valuable information. The other categories will tell us more specifically who those kids are. And that group of youngsters needs to, the high needs now has to be a minimum of 30 students. So again, the high needs students, as I said, it eliminates counting the kids over and over. It actually holds 300 more schools in the Commonwealth accountable, and most schools are going to be placed in levels based on their performance of all students and their high needs group. So those will be the two main focus that the state will be watching and monitoring. And then the exception to that is the schools with the lowest performing subgroups statewide, and the state will offer some additional support through their DSAC level 3 and level 4 schools.
And before you, 80% of the districts in Massachusetts are 1 or 2. How many are 1s, how many are 2s, do we know?
I don't know that specifically. I
Okay.
could probably try to figure that out.
Okay, then the other question before you. One of the subgroups is former English language learners.
Correct.
How long does a child stay in that group before?
They actually have to test out of it, but they can be in this country or receiving services for 1 year before ultimately they are held accountable to MCAS. So we could still call them an English language learner student even though they've been being provided with English language learner services for 3 or 4 years. They have to test out of that in order to, and typically they test out and then we put them on a monitor for 2 years. So while they may not be receiving direct services, we still are identifying them as they had been an English language learner.
And what kind of testing is that? That's something that the district does?
No, you're going to hear more about that. At the last meeting, I talked about the MELA-O and the MIPA, and the state has changed that. And come January, all our ELL students, and again, right now we have 7 that are being provided direct service in the district, they will take the new assessment called Access. So once we determine then how proficient they are on Access, actually determines what group, what level of support they're receiving, whether they're being put on a monitor, whether we'll watch their progress over 2 years, and then ultimately whether they take MCAS the following year.
I don't know if you can answer this, but generally in the past, a child was an English language learner, they have some help for a couple of years. At some point, we feel that they're doing well, they can integrate into the regular classroom, no extra help. I mean, generally these students just go ahead and move on and do fine.
We have some who right now are on year 4 and year 5 of getting some type of intervention. Honestly, it really depends on when they enter the system, because for many of our students, the earlier they enter the system, by nature of a word-rich vocabulary at an elementary school, they pick up the language as well as the content a little quicker. If they have entered our schools as middle school or high school student, not only are they learning the language, but they're learning then the content. And some of the content vocabulary words, particularly in a science class, is very, very challenging and difficult, so they may stay in the program a little longer. The state does not say a minimum or a maximum amount of time how long they receive those services. So we have some right now who we've been servicing 4 and 5 years. The next category just shows you those levels in a chart where now the top category says commendation schools, and the commissioner this year for the first time will come out with a list of schools that he is saying showed high achievement, high growth, and they have started to really narrow closing the achievement gap. They actually will be in level 1, but he is going to come out and make a commendation, so he will have a certain subset of schools that he will want to highlight and show these schools have made significant improvement. So that'll be a new change coming too as well. And as I said, right now our leveling is a level 2. We're not meeting the closing of the achievement gap. However, we are making some progress towards that. Our progress is limited, but we are moving in the right direction.
We're a level 2 with the new regulation, we're not using the old.
We were a level 2 with the old
Yeah, I
rule
know,
as well.
but- and it's-
Yes, yep. So then the next chart that you have in front of you, and I do apologize for the size of this screen. When I put this presentation together on Sunday, it was still embargoed, so I was taking it off of the security portal. However, the next few slides will just give you an indicator on how the PPI is actually being reported. So the first slide that you see in front of you is actually of the entire district. And you can see right now that we are meeting our requirements. However, we're at risk for meeting that. And that just means that we're not closing the gap as fast as we should be. But for the first time now, we're given a personal target. And each year now, we will try to meet or exceed that target. So again, it shows that we are a level 2 school district, and that as an aggregate, all of our students included, our PPI is a 64. Now, the state tells us they really hoped that school districts would be at a 75. We're a little bit short of that, but our achievement gap to close now, if we take 100 and we subtract the 64, and then we do the math and we make the division, that we then see that our gap is no longer at 100, but that we have to strive for about an 82 by the year 2017. That number should change, and that number should get higher each year we come before you. Our high needs group is very, very close to our aggregate. It's at a 63. But then you can see some of the students that are in that high needs group are also low income or students with disabilities. We have, as I said, only 14 ELL students in the total district. Not all of them took MCAS, but because that sampling was small, it's not actually reported. But our low-income students, the PPI was a 57, and our students with disabilities were a 47. And then one of the 7 ethnic categories, our white students achieved 72 PPI. The next slide really is just a definition slide, and it'll really tell you what is the definition for accountability and assistance levels, what is determination for special ed technical assistance intervention. Again, as I said, we are meeting requirements, but we're at risk. We are not at level 3, so the state isn't coming in and providing more intensive direct support for us. We have to be creative and use our Title II, our Title I funds, and our local district funds in order to make sure that we're closing that achievement gap. The definition of school percentiles, and then ultimately the cumulative PPI, the Progress and Performance Index. The next slide, we're just going to start going down. We'll start up at the high school. And it's our belief, in our opinion, at this point in time, that the PPI of 34 is inaccurate. We just reported this week to the state because we have 90% of our grade 10 students in ELA alone scoring at proficient or advanced. And so it says here that we had less than 95% participation rate in MCAS. And according to Cheryl and her data, we had more than 95% of our kids participate in MCAS. So we're just not sure now, is that counting our out-of-district students, because our kids that attend our out-of-district placements, such as collaboratives, that Westport is responsible for. It's not private and it's not the parochial schools, but it would be the kids that we are placing out of our district for services. Is this inclusive of those youngsters? We have no control over their programs, but yet we are being included in those scores. Or we do have some of our students who were credit deficient, and because they were credit deficient, they're like a quasi 10th, 11th grader. So on paper, they may be recorded as a 10th grader because you're either a 10th grader or you're an 11th grader. They're taking some junior level courses, but yet they have not completed the 10th grade year, but they already took MCAS. So as a repeat 10th grader, you wouldn't take it a second time, but yet on paper, does it look like we have many more 10th graders? So we have put in a request to the state to explain why it says we have less than 95% participation. If you do then, though, look at the PPI for all students, okay, not as a school, but looking just at the all-student category there, it says we met the target, and it also says that our high needs were at 87. So Westport High is doing very, very well, according to the Progress and Performance Index. The next school is our middle school. Our middle school achieved a PPI overall score of 57. And in this particular case, it means, we did better than at least half of the other middle schools in the Commonwealth. Again, we strive to be at a 75, but we're at a 72 for all of our students. So we didn't meet our target, but we're coming very close. Our high needs kids scored at a 66. And then you can see we did have low income, and we had our special needs students with disabilities reported there. And then finally, I will share with you the elementary school. Again, they scored smack in the middle at 50%, which means 50% scored better than them, but we're right there in the average of all schools. And our PPI of 63, we didn't meet the target, but we're getting close to the 75. Our high needs kids, though, did very well. They're at a 71, and then you can see we have our low income as well as our students with disabilities. So that's a little bit of the accountability story on what our rating is. And again, each year now, we should start to see that number grow higher as we get closer to 2017 and try to close that proficiency gap. And then the last thing, while these numbers do tell a story, and the next time we have our school committee meeting, our principals are going to be here, and they're going to give you a much more comprehensive analysis on the different categories as well as comparisons to previous years. And they're also going to tell you what their action plan is, what we're doing to help close that achievement gap. There are conditions for school effectiveness, and this comes right from the Department of Ed, saying, the numbers do tell a story, but in order to be a successful school and a successful school district, you need to have all 11 of these components in place, and you need to be doing them all very, very well to close that achievement gap.
Anybody have any questions, comments? John?
Second.
Way through?
And I know you just got this data because it was embargoed until today. So certainly, as I said, when we come back on the 26th, the principals and I will be here. And if you have any questions at that point in time, we'd be glad to digest a little bit more of this after you've had a chance to take a look at it a little more closely.
How do these scores compare to the last 2-3 years?
This is a brand new rating, so we can't, as far as PPI, we can't make any comparison to the past with that.
Now, it seems like every year the state resets the clock, and it makes it impossible for people to, to actually track
Well, even
the progress. They changed.
May I jump on that?
Sure.
Because even though the state is trying to look at a different measure, you have to remember the measure that they had was that everybody would be sort of perfect, proficient by next year. Now, I think what happened was people finally realized, all kids are not the same. They're not coming from the same background. You can't have that perfect expectation for everyone, but you can certainly expect schools to improve from where they're at and move forward. So when they did the PPI, they're looking more at what are you doing to improve the lot of the kids while you have them in school, whether they're, kids that have no issues to kids that have high needs, kids that have special needs, kids that don't, kids that come from family backgrounds that are low socioeconomic to kids that don't. So they're trying to push us to look at those populations and say, what are we doing for those kids in specific, and what are we doing grade level by grade level to improve individual kids' performance. And it's difficult because everybody wants to be able to compare everybody with everybody, and it's hard. That's hard to do. Well, you want to compare us to other schools, you want to compare us to the state, we're going to compare this state to another state, and it's difficult because we're not all the same. When you take a look at our districts, you can't compare us to Dartmouth. We're not the same as Dartmouth. You can't compare us to Fairhaven. We're not the same as Fairhaven. There are certain things that are the same. They're just using these measures to try to go across all the different schools and decide, how are we doing as a school, as a district, and as a state? That being said...
That's not my question. My question is...
But that being said, you still have the same information.
The MCAS were the same. We have that data. We have the scores.
So far you do. And if you look on your...
That's different from this.
Right, but if you look on your blotters, you have one that has a whole bunch of those little charts that you're used to, in which you're given 4 years of performance, which is a lot of what the state used to base these PPI performance measures on. So you can still do the comparison year to year, trend over 3 or 4 years. You can do the trend of following the same class year to year to year. And I can tell you the story is still the same. It hasn't changed much from the last few years. Once we find the kids in 3rd or 4th grade that are struggling, chances are by the time they get to high school, we have improved their performance to the point where they're successful. So you go from, 73% of our kids 4 years ago proficient in advanced in grade 3. You move that 4 years, and you go to grade 6, and they're moving up. And by the time they get to grade 10, you have 78% of them at proficient or advanced for math. In ELA, you start at around 62. By the time they get to ELA in 10th grade, 90%. So we take them where they start, where we get them, and we move them up. Now, as we looked this summer at the figures that we were getting in terms of ELA scores and math scores and other information we have, for example, we have Dibble's data, we have Galileo data for math, we have other measures as well. We're looking and we're finding areas where there needs to be improvement. You can see certain grade levels where performance went down 1 year to the next. You see certain grade levels where performance flattens out in general over the last few years. That's where we took a look at the district improvement plan, and we said, if we know those areas of concern, what are we doing to improve those? Because the only way you're going to see the PPI improve or the MCAS improve is if you target those areas where you're not strong. We have done some of that already. We had seen some of the math numbers coming back and saying, we're not very good at number sets. We're not ready to take on the core curriculum that the state's putting forward. So we went ahead and looked for a series or materials that would be more aligned with that would give the students more exposure to number sense. And now we purchased it with monies that we saved last year, and we're implementing this year. In fact, I just took a picture of Dr. Dargan, a bunch of teachers, and one of the consultants the other day, because I want to say, yeah, I've seen it happening. We're training the staff to use this new series in hopes of seeing the math scores improve from 4th grade on up. Actually, our hope is from kindergarten on up. But that takes years to see it grow through the school district. We can point to data points and say, math in the middle grades, not as strong. But we're looking at the math series and saying, okay, we have a math series K through 4. We're piloting the same series and perhaps a couple others in 5th and 6th. But that means they're still using the old stuff. That perhaps is not aligned. 7th and 8th, they're going to have to step up to the plate because the new standards changed the focus towards, by the time you get to 8th grade, you're going to see algebra, a lot more than it has been in the past. So there are changes coming, and we're trying to use the district improvement plan to say, here's a path for improvement. In ELA, I can tell you the biggest glaring issue that we see is writing. You take a look at ELA scores in MCAS, and they tell part of the picture. But when we drill down and we take a look at students' actual writing performance in the MCAS, we can tell you it's not as strong as it should be. We can tell you there's many cases where students don't even fill out that part of the test. And that's not acceptable. But when we go back and we ask the staff, what are you using? Everybody's using something totally different. Over the last 10, 15
For how many
years.
years has every teacher been using something totally different?
Well, different teachers joined our ranks over the last 15 years, and there were different programs presented to them. They took a little bit of this and a little bit of that, or the new teachers coming in, it's whatever they learned in school when they came out of college. Because when they come here, we have never really described or prescribed a writing program for them that gives them, here's what you do in first grade, here's the expectations, here's the assessments we're going to use. We don't have it in second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way up. So I'm actually surprised that the students do as well as they do.
Because your conversation has kind of gone over to district improvement plan, can we at least jump to the action just because of the time?
Yeah.
Jump to the action agenda so we can at least combine the two discussions of the MCAS data and the district improvement plan for the next 20 minutes so that we can all get to the west for the open house.
That's our plan to me.
So am I to assume that when I look at these graphs, and I look at an 8th grade for 2012, and then I jump over to 2011 and look at the 7th grade, that I'm following the same class? So
Yes.
we can still look at that data and figure out, now, it does seem, I mean,
In 10th grade, you have to go back 2 years to the 8th grade data. So if you're looking at
right.
2012 data, you really have to look at who was in 8th grade in 2010. So I can tell you, those students in 8th grade 2 years ago, 52% of them were advanced or proficient in math. At the high school, they're at 78%. So there's been a jump.
On these here, if you look at,
She's saying if I go from
Grade
the
8
middle
math.
Grade 8 math?
Right.
to grade 10 math,
Okay.
you have to look 2 years apart.
grade 8 math at 2010 would be the same class of kids
Right.
as
The 2012,
the 2012.
10th graders.
And if you go year to year, I can tell you that in math, you know, it's a mixed,
Well, so, I
it's a
mean,
mixed story. You have, 4th grade has gone down year to year in the last few years, 5th grade's gone up, 6th grade's gone down, 7th grade's been kind of staying even, 8th grade year to year's been staying even, and then when you get to the high school, they jump back up. So, as we look at that, we say, okay, whatever we're doing at the high school is working. Leave the high school alone.
right, well, when you look at the, even just taking a look at the warning failing for the school, as 8th graders, they were at 17% for math, and as sophomores, they're at 6%.
Right.
So they've dropped, the warning failing kids have jumped.
Some of it may be maturity, some of it may be programs, some of it is the test,
High
but there is a
stakes at
trend.
that point, too.
Huh?
Right, they
High
have to
stakes.
pass.
Yeah. So in some
Purposeful,
ways,
meaningful in high school.
even though it's the same class, it's not the same conditions.
Right. So now, in reference to the district improvement plan, what are we doing in there to fix what we have for inadequacies?
That's where I went through and I said, you know, some of the goals for us is to make sure that we're shifting our resources in 3 areas. One, instruction. So we're trying to get materials for the teachers to use to teach and bring in training for them to use those new materials. We did that, like I said, K through 4. 5 and 6, we should do something this year. 7th and 8th, I think once we define 5 and 6, will be a little easier to determine what may be used there, because again, the new standards totally change what we used to do, so they're going to have to change the way they teach and what they teach. And then the other part is the units of study. The conversation, which was very interesting at the training the other day that I took a look at. Was it yesterday? Oh God, the days blend. The conversation was, well, can I do this part first, like this unit first, because we prefer to do that. And, you know, the consultant came in and said, yes, if you do that, then you need to know that all these other pieces need to be prerequisites, so make sure the kids understand those concepts before you jump over here. Not that you can't do it, you just need to be aware of it. So we still have to work with the units of study. What is an appropriate scope and sequence? What are you going to teach first, and then what you're going to build on? So that's 2. And 3 is the assessment. The series does come with assessments built into it. So not only do we have MCAS, hopefully we'll have a series that as the teachers give end of the chapter tests or quizzes or use the summative assessments built into it, plus we have Galileo. Now you have 3 data points that tell you which kids are doing well and which aren't before you get to 3rd grade or 4th grade when you see the first MCAS.
So this is a series that you're looking for
We
all
already bought it.
classes,
Yes.
right across the board, so that all 6 or 5 teachers are using exactly the same tool to
Exactly.
be able to assess equally, so that you know if a child in this class is doing this well based on that reading, then this child that's doing equally can kind of be, even though they have a different teacher, they can still sort of assume that they have the same level of knowledge.
It'll also help us pinpoint if any group of kids in any particular classroom is struggling, and you may be able to, God forbid, but we sometimes do this, move them between rooms, because you got 3 kids over there, I got 2 kids over here that have the same level
can
of
help,
need.
right.
Put them in a small group and help them. You know, that kind of an approach you can do if you have enough data to identify the kids that are struggling so you can move them up. And that's what the PPI is all about, is identifying those students, creating that RTI system. These kids have a little bit of need, you can do that in the classroom. These kids have more need, you can do a little bit of a pull-up. These kids have a lot of need, hey, maybe we need to think about special ed for them. So all these pieces of the district improvement plan go right off of the data, and you're trying to create systems that will address the needs long-term. In other words, these changes don't happen overnight. Just because we put in a math series this year, it doesn't mean in 4th grade you're going to see a jump next year.
Dr. Collins, what did we do last year for our math scores last year?
Basically, I'll tell you, we established an RTI system, which we had some pieces of it. But we created a system where we said, okay, these are the kids that need more. We did more training with the teachers on number sense, which was the area that was, we could look at the MCAS score, tease it apart, and basically we were able to say, okay, this is the areas that you need to pay more attention to. But the series we had was the series we had, and wasn't really well geared towards meeting the standards, because it's an old series.
And part of the problem last year was that we had old Common Core, and we had the 2011 math frameworks. And last year, or the scores that you're looking in front of you, was a combination. So the kids were
Half and
assessed
half, right.
on some of the old standards and some of the new standards. And so it was early on in January or February when we started to have a conversation with the school committee on, we know that the program that we're using is not effective.
I remember when you told us that.
So we sat down by grade level over at the elementary school and we actually had to start to extrapolate what do the kids really need to know and be able to do. And for some of the staff, it was really hard letting go of some of the topics and some of the concepts that they've always taught and that they've always enjoyed. And so what we really needed to do, why we liked this particular series as opposed to some of the others on the market, some of the other series say that they're aligned to the Common Core, the new standards. But what they really did is they have the old and they put out a new little amended version, and it said, only teach these chapters or only teach these concepts.
So everything was in there, you would just skip
Had
it.
to figure out what you needed to teach.
What to
This-
skip, what to leave in,
This
what to
new
take out.
program was written specifically for the Common Core, so that at some of our grades, there's actually only 4 standards now that are actually being taught all year long. But they're very, very intense. The consultant yesterday said they need to spend a minimum of 60 minutes a day on mathematics. The program is written for about 144 days, so it allows for some reteaching. It also allows for some of the days that might be early release or other events that are happening. So there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to not just cover the material, but
teach it
teach
well.
for mastery then too as well. So I think last year was the start of putting RTI, but also a year of looking at what's currently do we have and what do we need to have. We're also looking now at our writing. For right now, this reading and writing series that we have, the Scott Forsman, is over 10 years old. The Basil series is outdated. I mean, the pictures are antiquated even in the book. 50% of what our kids should be reading is nonfiction. The Basil has primarily fiction in the book. So we're now looking at, in addition to guided reading, because we know the skills have to be taught someplace.
Right.
We showed good growth in English language arts in the district as a whole.
Right.
So now really we have to look at the writing. We have several of our youngsters who got a 0 on a short answer response, which tells you they made no attempt to put anything down on paper. Why? And there could be numbers of reasons for that. But we have to really define now at each grade level what's going to happen, in the writing piece of it.
I hate to simplify it too much, but the multiplication tables don't change every year. They're the same ones we teach today, the same ones we all learned when we were in school. What kind of program do you need to teach basic math facts to a child so that when they start doing more advanced math, they start getting into division and fractions, that they can pull up those simple math facts that we all, at 3rd grade, we should all know the
6 times 6.
26.
Our kindergarten
My
teachers.
point is we keep blaming programs for a student or school not doing well in math.
I know you will, and let me just say as well, you're right, and I'd like you to elaborate on it, and I'll give you a chance as well, but I think if I understand, the purpose behind a lot of this stuff is not just to teach, but it's to take all the classes and make sure they're all teaching the same. They're teaching the same things, they're teaching the same way, so that...
That's a memo. That's a memo from the leader. Really?
No, you got to provide the same materials, though, to
The
everybody for the
tools.
expectation.
And when you mentioned the units of study,
Yeah.
every year we try and do more and more, but then right after that you started talking about how, but some teachers want to know if they can, well, wait a minute, we're doing units of study.
No.
If you deviate from the unit of study, we're not doing a unit of study.
They were talking in terms of the whole group, which unit to do first.
Because at some point when that class takes that exam, they all need to have
I
being
don't
at that,
disagree.
the right
They
point.
were asking, where does this unit of study that they've created and written, where does it fit within that series? That's all they were asking. And they were asking as a group. They did not look at, I want to go this way, you want to go that way. No. They were asking, as a group, how are we going to do this? So that's been done. I mean, we have more than half the units of study already created. We still have some areas where they're still working on it. Art, music, PE, they spent the whole, 2-3 days
And we
this summer?
spent the summer, we
Yeah.
worked on it this summer.
They worked on it this summer, so they're moving in that direction. You have people who teach 3-4 different classes, like here at the high school where it's a singleton, that they have to create units for each one of those classes, so each year they've been doing like one of their classes and creating the units for that. It does take time. So
Carolina?
we've been working on it, but we're moving. I would say that's one of those areas that we actually are doing fairly well.
I'd just like to point out that the reading and the math that we did is not the reading and the math that my children are doing. They're doing geometry. They're being exposed to things that, at those grade levels, we never saw. Yeah, you're right, we learned the multiplication table, we memorized 1 + 1 and the 1 - 1. We did all of that rote memorization. We were never exposed to some of the stuff these kids are coming home with. I look at it and go, I didn't do this in the 2nd grade, I didn't do this in the 4th grade.
Well, even from the time my oldest, who's a senior, has gone through till the time my other two.
Ask her to help the 7th grader.
It is
She'll
totally
be going,
changed.
I don't
But
remember that.
But even their thought, it's not just about teaching the memorization the way I see it now versus even the way it was when my oldest went through. It's about how they get to that process, the thought process behind it.
Metacognition.
And the thought
Yeah.
process behind it is also creating and setting the stage for the classes when they get into calculus and when they get into algebra and when they get into geometry. As I understand it, that whole technique of how you reach the answer is different than just
I wrote.
do it.
Look, maybe it's just me, but when a child in the 2nd grade, 3rd grade comes home with a math assignment, and the parent can't figure out how they're supposed to be figuring it.
Is that
That's
happening
a
at your house,
problem.
Tony?
Yeah, many
wondering.
times.
Just wondering.
Wait,
We over-analyze things.
that's not our decision at this point.
That's the core
coming
curriculum
down from the
they've given
curriculum.
us.
The framework.
We're being told this is what the children need to learn to do well on these tests.
You'll be
Or get
happy
into
to
college.
hear.
Obviously,
Or
we
get
all
it
know
in
how that's
college.
working out.
Our kindergarten teachers were shocked that the expectation with the new Common Core in math and the new program that they're using has the expectation that the kindergarten, 5- and 6-year-olds, will add and subtract to 20, whereas the kindergarten teachers, well, we've only done to 10 before. So in many, many ways, we have not expanded or advanced our youngsters as quickly as we possibly could and should. One of the other changes over at the kindergarten is kids were traditionally taught, 1 + 1 = 2. And so now the number sentences presented before them are 2 = 1 + 1. And some of our educators were concerned that our kids wouldn't necessarily be able to understand that. And in many ways, we were selling our kids short and not holding them to higher expectations.
My son
And-
had one of those the other day in 1st grade.
Mhm.
It was backwards.
So it's very rigorous, this new program, and it's absolutely aligned and written specifically for the new Common Core.
Now, what about with the writing? Because that is something I know, I see it in my high schooler. And it has, creatively, she does very well, and many of them do, but it's the formation of the writing, and, they've always written by those,
5 paragraphs.
There are
5
definitely
sentences.
more than, you can't just get at the creative writing part and ignore the mechanics and the grammatical pieces
So is it
of
the
writing.
creative writing part that or is it the grammatics? It's the grammatics that we're struggling with.
I would say, see,
My
depending
vote
who
would be
you
the
talk to
grammatics.
who works in curriculum, there may be up to 6 different ways to categorize parts of writing. And, we're good in some and not so much in others. So when you're talking about word usage, when you're talking about vocabulary, when you're talking about the mechanics of writing, I'm not so sure we're strong in that suit. When you're talking about things like voice and creativity and sticking to topic, we work hard on that.
Right.
So you have some pieces of it that may be better than others. We're just not consistently saying, hey, you got to pay attention to all 6 parts, not just
Well,
1 or 2.
I mean, I think part of the problem that I have seen as a parent of children coming in through different schools is, and this goes back to what we were just talking about, giving all of the teachers the same tools and sort of having the expectations of the teachers that are similar, is you may have teacher A who's requiring students to have vocabulary words, write them down, look them up, and write down the meaning of them, and then actually be tested on them. And then you have other teachers that are not doing that.
Well,
So-
if you take a look at the district improvement plan, it is asking staff to work together and at the school level to say that should not happen.
Well, and this is what I'm
People
asking you,
should be
how are we
working-
changing that?
Well, people should be working together. As they create these units, they also create the assessments that go with it, and they have to agree to them. You can't just put a unit together for second grade and decide, I'm going to teach this part of it and not. And then there's another part of the district improvement plan that says it is the administrators that should be getting into those classrooms, in particularly with the new teacher evaluation and supervision process and program. They have to
And
get in
holding
there.
them to that.
Not just holding them to that, asking for data, actually having proof. So if you have 3 teachers that teach second grade and one's putting out that kind of assessment, the principal should be going and saying, okay, let me see yours, let me see yours, and let me see yours. Let's get together, and all 3 of you, let's see, if you have 4 kids that didn't do well, and you had 2 kids that didn't do well, and all your kids did well, what did you do differently? That's
do
the
that now.
conversation.
Is that the common, what do they call it, the common,
Yeah.
the teachers get a
Grade
period-
level meetings, common planning time.
Common planning
We don't
time.
have a
Is that
lot
what
of
that's
that.
for?
We don't have a lot of that. We're
2
using,
hours a month.
yeah, we're
2 hours a
using
month?
substitutes, we're using, stealing a little bit of time here, a little time there. These are the parts where people go, oh, why are schools always looking for more money? Because certain things will not happen if you don't put resources to it.
Do individual teachers know how their children, their students did on the,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were all given the MCAS information.
and they know what their fellow teachers have done, so they know where they stand in their grade level as far as, if there's 5 first grade or whatever.
Are you saying if there's 5 grade first
the
grade
5 grade-
teachers, that they put them up on the board and?
Well, not up on the board, but do they know where they
They could.
stand amongst their peers in any particular class, or?
They could. I'm not sure if they do that level of analysis as to how many you get versus how many you get, but they could. The data is
I
there.
mean, that would be 4th grade
Yeah, okay.
through 8th. They did write success plans for any youngster who scored in needs improvement or warning over the summer, so that on day 1, they could, at the middle school, begin the interventions for those youngsters. So in the past, we used to have to wait. MCAS typically wouldn't be released till October. It would be like November before you were writing the prescription
Of what to do.
provide additional support for the youngsters. They started now on day 1. We've identified those youngsters. They know who they are, and they're doing the interventions, yes. But we also have other data now, and that's a piece of, we've had a huge shift. Data used to be thought of as so negative, and now teachers are starting to look at data and use data to make some effective decisions. And so we use progress monitoring 3 times a year over at the elementary school to determine who needs services or who's not.
And all that data is obviously available to the school principal, so that
Yes.
principals in each building know
And
which
we're
one of the
asking
teachers
for
are
it.
putting out the better product, basically.
Well,
Yes.
and we're asking for the data as well, so that we can look grade to grade. And this is what I'm saying, when we put together the district improvement plan, it's not out of thin air. We actually collect this data, have the principals bring it, and then we look grade level by grade level, how did they do in ELA, all the data measure points that we have, same thing in math, and go grade level by grade level, so we can say, okay, where are the areas that we need to improve? It's not about a gotcha thing. It's about, okay, we've had these things in place. Are they working? If they're not, we should get something else that may work better. Or the teachers have all the materials they need. What else can they use? Maybe they need more training. We don't have assessment data. What do they need? That's what we do in the district improvement
But even
plan.
with these existing scores, and last year's scores, and the year before that, and so on and so forth, in this data, I'm sure we could find those great teachers that are pushing those numbers up.
You can.
And you could find those great teachers that are maybe
You
not
can.
pushing those
I
numbers
mean,
up.
some of it,
Well, I
it
think the
depends on the data that
evaluation
you
will help
have.
with that, too.
Like right now, if you take a
So
look.
what I'm trying to get at, so regardless of the program that was in place and regardless of the improvement plan that was in place, there were people that were getting it done. So we just can't say the program that we had last year or 2 years ago was old, it's not working, we got this new program. I mean, there were people, there
But you
were
want
teachers that were getting it done.
But you want consistency.
Okay, but the answer might be right in front of us.
What you really want to look at is it's on this cover sheet, but it's also on each of the graphs. And it's really the category that says SGP, the student growth
Student
percentile.
growth percentile.
So if you look at just the first one, that's all words with no graphs and charts. That's just really right off the Department of Ed website, and this is now public data, and everybody and anybody can have access to this. But the state says that good growth
Between
is somewhere
40 and
between
60.
40 and 60. So automatically, I just scan all the way down, and you can see, grade 3 reading, grade 3 math, all the way down, and you want to see between 40 and 60. And I just put a check mark beside anybody, any grade that was not within, good growth. And then said, okay, what's going on? And you can see it's mathematics, and it's mathematics at the middle school. So now what was going on there? Not making...
What grade is the first MCAS at the middle school?
We start MCAS at grade 3.
No,
but I'm
at the middle
looking-
school, at the middle
Oh,
school.
grade 5.
All right, so we're testing fourth grade work, no? I mean, in general?
No, it's
No.
fifth grade. It's a year
It's
of
fifth
growth.
grade.
What time of the year? When do they take the exam?
ELAs are in
March, and math are in
math is
May.
So,
in
all
May.
right, so it's mostly fifth, okay.
Yep. So then you want to know the story behind that, and, what was going on. So then you can look at particular students, and then the student growth measures 2 years' worth of growth. It takes that same youngster, how they were the year before, and they rank order them statewide compared to how they did of other like students and where they measure up the following year. So in this particular case, as a whole, it's jumping out, glaring at me that mathematics is a weaker area for us and that we need to go in and we need to look at that. So then going in, then you'll be able to see the graphs and the charts. Is it a teaching issue, or was this historical? Was this student population always showing below state recommendation growth? And then, you dig and you drill a little bit deeper. Now, who are these students? What are we going to do for them is more important at this point in time. The numbers are great, but now it's the action plan. So when the principals come...
That SGP column, that growth that we want to see between 40 and 60,
Mhm.
that's compared to our own scores, it's not.
No.
No.
This
No,
is
no, no.
this
Compared
is
to
a
the
student
state?
compared to any
Okay.
other student in the Commonwealth, which
That
is why
looked that way.
third grade doesn't have a student growth percentile.
'Cause you can't go back 2
you need 2
years.
years' worth of growth. So their third grade, or their first year taking MCAS, is their first year of baseline data. So it's measuring their performance the year before against a student who scored the exact same score the year before, and where did they fall in that next year's rank order. And they say ranking anywhere, like a bell curve, anywhere between 40 and 60 is good growth. So as a whole, then I look at this and I say, and that's, last year what we started to do by looking at the student growth percentiles and said, okay, what do we tackle first, or where can we make some significant improvements? And that's why we, made math a priority this year.
We are already on 6 o'clock, so is there any action at this point on this?
The only thing that concerns me is the district improvement plan. If I just printed one of the Mass Ed Department PowerPoints. The idea is, from the big picture of the district, what's needed, the data that you've looked at, the areas identified for improvement, that you should then take a look at the building level, from the building to the individuals within the building, to set up goals and plans for improvement. And that the longer...
So the principals of the schools will use the district improvement plan to help build their...
The goals from the
piece.
district improvement plan translate into similar goals at each of the buildings, that then translate to principal goals, that then translate into teacher goals, that translate into, hopefully, student performance.
And
So-
they won't do that until...
Well, they'll do draft forms and try to approximate kind of work, because we did work together this summer to do this. This
Okay.
just, it's not.
Where's, it's right here.
Now, Dr. Clyde, last week at the last meeting, I mean, you went, I mean, it was a long meeting, went through this rather quickly. And do you not want more time to go over this and properly present it?
The pieces in there, like I said, is the instructional pieces, which I've mentioned some of the things that we would like to see in terms of goals for the district. You have the assessment goals, which is basically we wanted to add Galileo at the middle school, so we have a different data point for math, knowing that that's an area of concern. We wanted to add, continue the work that we've been doing in the units of study, hopefully getting 2 per educator, whether it be revise them or do new ones. When you're talking about resources, I would love to see a shift in our strategy to go after 2.5% right on town floor. That way we have a locked-in amount of growth. That's what's allowed by statute in terms of the growth in the town. And then if we need anything else, we go after either savings or a ballot question. I was going to leave partnerships alone because I think we've done good work in there. I was going to leave sports and activities alone. So those are the highlights.
That's what we've been talking about.
They all tie together. And literally, they come right out of the data.
Dr. Clyde, the other day we were talking about some of the percentages you had in here. How do those percentages, how do you compare some of those, you know, the increase in percentages? Percentages you put in here for increase. How do those compare with the PPI?
I think they will go hand in hand. I mean, one of the things we did a lot of is taking the information from the MCAS and what we know from other data points, whether it be Dibble's data or Galileo data, where are the kids at? We know that not all kids come to us at the same level of readiness to learn. So we wanted to leave at least some wiggle room for kids that at one point in time may have a family that's falling apart, social issues, special ed issues, but we wanted to move people, educators, from the teachers to the administrators in the building to the administrators at central office, saying we want to see growth. So when I say we want 90% of the students to show 5% increase on their scores in the MCAS, basically all that means is we're shifting all the kids up, or at least the majority of them. When we're talking about looking at classroom level assessments like finals or midterms, and we say we want 90% of the kids to be proficient, I don't know about you, but if I was a teacher and I didn't have 90% of my kids or better passing my test at the end of the year, I didn't do my job. So we're simply putting into the district improvement plan some measurable objectives that are to us, and we sat and we talked about it, and some people wanted less, some people wanted more. We said, what is reasonable to do within a year or 2 years? All right, so if we're going to go up...
But is reasonable good enough?
Well, you can't set the stage where you're going to expect failure from all your administrators and your educators, because you will just break their spirit. If you want them to show growth, ask them to show growth. And 9 times out of 10, I'll give you an example. We were talking to the, I love the kindergarten people, we're bringing them up a lot. We said, we would like to have the kids reading at level X at the end of kindergarten. And we want, 80% of the kids reading at that level. And the teachers were concerned because it's a new idea, a new benchmark. Oh my God, you mean I got to get the kids here? 85% did it. So it's not like the teachers are holding the kids back. It's us saying, what would be an appropriate measure? Starting from the point of view of saying, we haven't done this before. This new educator's supervision and evaluation model is asking people to go down to brass tacks and say, put the number in. What are you going to measure? How much growth are you willing to stick your neck out for? Now, if you put it way up here like the state did and said we want 100%, look at what happened. That's not going to happen. Finally, the state and the nation as a whole said, that wasn't a good idea. Sounded good. Politically, it was great. Some people got elected over that. But it's not real. So we're trying to say, from where we are, where do we want to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? If you're requesting people to grow every year, by the time you get 5 years down the road, this will be a different district. I'm not saying it's possible if you don't put any effort into it, resources included, but it can be done. I look at this and I say, what did we do the last few years? We took the monies we saved from special ed, sunk it right back into the school. We have an opportunity to do that again this year. I put in there, these are the areas that I think we should be targeting if we have any savings, whether it be out of people that left and we hired people at a lower salary, or whether it be because the state decided to give us more money this year, and probably just this year, in terms of additional circuit breaker money. I would say take the opportunity and use it.
Some of these resources you have in here for FY13, needed resources, how are those compared to what is currently available now for...
I can tell you, if you try to do everything that's in that district improvement plan, you don't have enough money. You don't. But, if we don't tell people that the needs are there, when we get halfway through the year, say, we have, $80,000 worth of savings in teacher salaries, people are going to say, well, we want it for this, we want it for that, we want it for that other thing. I think the administrators sat together and said, what are the things we need to improve? These are the things we need. Is it 80? Probably not. Probably it's like closer to 150,000. But at least if we have 80, we should put it back towards the school to improve teaching. That's just kind of where we came at it.
All right, at this point, is there either a motion to approve this, or is there suggestions for change on that plan?
I'll make a motion to approve the plan as it is, and obviously it's a work in progress.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, is there any discussion on this? I know we've discussed it a lot, but no?
Yeah, let me just say something.
Oh, go ahead.
At the last meeting, remember the committee motioned to reject the school improvement, the district improvement plan, and I voted with them. And I made it clear that I guess what I was rejecting was the fact that we were approving a plan before seeing the data.
Right.
So my idea wasn't to reject the plan, it was to reject the process. And so I don't have any, if it was taken that way, that's not my intent.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I don't think there's any comments and statements from the public at this point. Is there a motion to adjourn so that we can
And go to the elementary.
the West?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.